Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music. And also, as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today I am in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and we are talking via FaceTime with a great musician. Known him for a while. I'll tell you exactly how in a minute. From Vermont, Scott Ainslie. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and talk
Jeff,
about
it's
this.
nice to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you. So I do remember when we met. It was kind of brief. It was maybe 2005 or six. You were doing a gig down here near our neck of the woods in Maryland, and I was on this project of producing a CD called Songs of Peace and Forgiveness, which was sort of original music or public domain music by blues musicians, other musicians about, songs about peace and forgiveness and love and whatever. And I just randomly asked you, hey, would you mind contributing a song? And you very graciously said yes. And it was that song, You Got to Get Up, that you played on a diddly bow, I think you call it. Is that right?
Yeah. One string cigar box guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, that was just a fiery song. I really liked it. I just thought it was a great thing, song to have in that collection. So I appreciate that. Since then, I've kind of followed you, and it gets easier on Facebook. I know you get out and you play really all over the place, and you have a great, authentic kind of music and a great approach to life. And that's why I'm really interested in talking with you about some of these things.
I'm pleased to be with you.
So, where did music kind of come into your life? Do you remember? I mean, were your parents musical or were they not musical? Did you, listen to the radio, the Beatles, or you started playing guitar? I mean, how did this music thing creep into your
Well,
life?
it didn't actually creep. My mother my mother was a paper trained piano player. She could play, put the notes in front of her, and she could play. And so there was a piano in the house when I was born. And my mother found me at that piano, picking out melodies from the records she listened to during the day when I was 3 years old. So about the
Wow.
time I was learning to speak the English language, I was also learning the scales and piano. I happily trotted off on Saturday mornings when the other kids were home and available to play to my piano teacher in Rochester, New York
Cool.
in 1955.
Wow.
56, 57. And then we moved to North Jersey and ran into a lady who taught piano with a ruler in one hand. It would strike you with it. This woman's taught all over the world, I must tell you. It's the sadomasochism
Wow.
school of beating music into kids. And I decided that I didn't want to go see her anymore. I played everything I could get my hands on throughout my life. And in the fifth grade, they brought around band instruments, and I became a woodwind player, a flute player. I played a wooden ukulele, and then showing an early affinity for obnoxious metal instruments, I got a cast aluminum banjo ukulele, which was the loudest possible thing you could. It was like a tomahawk with strings. I mean, you could fight your way out of a bar with it and play it the next day. I now play 19, old national guitars, among other things. So, but I became a string instrument player, basically with the folk strings, and I heard a black gravedigger named John Jackson play in the middle of a Mike Seeger concert in 1967 at Groveton High School. And Mike had, 17 instruments on stage and was playing all of them, this powerful, astonishing multi-instrumentalist out of the Appalachian old-time music tradition.
Wow.
And John walked in the back door with a guitar, and Mike had obviously invited him to come, and he stopped his concert. Mike did, and said, "Look, there's a guy here you need to hear. John, come up here and play these people a couple of songs." So in the middle of his own show, with no guile or ego, Mike introduces John Jackson. John sits down and plays ragtime East Coast Piedmont blues on the guitar. And it was the most compelling and complicated guitar playing I'd ever heard. And I was listening carefully to the folk revival. I was listening carefully to the music that was on the radio. And I didn't know music like this existed in the world. I had not run across it. Nobody in my circle of friends had heard it. Nobody was passing around recordings. I was just absolutely flabbergasted. And I said, if you can do that with a guitar, sign me up. And I started playing guitar on borrowed instruments a month later. And when I was a lifeguard at a Boy Scout camp, and I was working essentially 5 or 5.5 hours a day at the waterfront, and I was playing guitar 6 or 7.
Wow.
And so by the end of the summer, I was a guitar player.
Wow, that's so cool. I wish I'd have sort of had that type of inspiration or whatever. But I do know John Jackson. I
Hmm.
went to Blues Week in West Virginia a number of
Sure.
times,
Yeah.
and before he passed, I saw him there a few times. I mean, just standing right next to you playing a song. What a
Yeah.
gentleman! What a beautiful way to play, sort of reminiscent of Mississippi John Hurt. And I love that style of playing too. I completely am with you on that.
John was like a black Buddha. We met, in 1967. By 1971, we met again and became friends. And I knew him for 35 years before he died in 2002. And he was a profound influence on me, both as a human being. He was like a black Buddha, a man of remarkable grace and skill and kindness, and a phenomenal musician. I mean, just a wonderful musician. So John was my first sort of taste of this vital, handmade American music that was out there. And I started, from that moment on, looking for old people who played. And I did it with old time musicians in the 1970s with Tommy Jarrell and Kyle Creed and Fred Cockrum, the Hammonds family up in West Virginia, these iconic players in the Southern Appalachian old time fiddle and banjo tradition, and played those instruments as well. And then with blues in the 1980s and 90s and into the early 2000s, with players in the Mid-Atlantic states in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. I transcribed all of Robert Johnson's work and published a book on it, a Mississippi Delta player, and knew Honey Boy Edwards pretty well. And so I've had an affinity for looking for old people. And my strategy with music is to go find the oldest person who plays it, who's still got their sense, and hang out with them if I can.
Wow, that is so great.
I'm a strong believer in the power and the necessity of apprenticeships. And I also know that when you love something, it will transform you. And so I think you should let the music change you before you change it. Now, traditions have to move. They have to be passed from hand to hand, from mouth to mouth. The song has to fit in your mouth. They have to be changed a little bit to survive. You can't just cast them in amber and act like that's it. But I just think that you should let it change you before you start messing with changing it.
Wow. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. That's that's really powerful music, the authentic music that comes out of those traditions of sitting around on a porch and that sort of thing. And I guess it's sort of, I mean, it's what was really important to people, before the TV and before all these other things that we have. I mean, it was a real social thing that kept them together and kept them going, I guess, right?
And this was, we tend to, and I'm a professional musician. I mean, my God, when any musician makes $1, I don't care who they are, somewhere an angel gets its wings. I mean, this is a good use of human resources. But these people made music because they were compelled to make it, because it served their community to make it. They made it because it made their families and their lives better and stronger. And we tend to lose sight of that if you just rush into the marketplace and make a piece of plastic that will eventually wind up floating around the Pacific Ocean without actually adding anything to the sum total of human knowledge. I mean, this is a high bar to set for ourselves, but we have to remember the original reason why people made music, and they made it to serve themselves, their communities. This wasn't self-expression so much as it was community expression. And I still feel like that is one of the most important parts of this picture that can very easily get lost when somebody rushes at the age of 19 into a recording studio hoping to make a bunch of money as a musician.
Yeah, it's who we are. I mean, we're vibrations. We've kind of come from sound and first there was the word, all that stuff. It's so powerful. I'm learning more and more about it all the time. So after you picked up guitar, and I know you've you just mentioned you've been around, you've been searching out music all your life. So but you've been playing, gigging, teaching your whole life all around the country, right? And I guess other countries, and that's
I,
what you
that,
do, and you take your song, your music, and out to people.
that's it's the only thing I'm really good at, and it's the highest expression of my the life I've lived. I'm 66, almost 67 years old, and I've been playing music since I was 3. Um, and that makes me one of the luckiest people in any airport lounge.
True. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And I'm also, I mean, there are dangers to being self-employed, and there are dangers to try and make a living as a musician, and they're profound. But I've managed to find a way to do this without being too badly hurt by it. And I think it was Ella Fitzgerald who one time was interviewed and asked about what it was like to be a professional musician, and she said essentially, what other job can you have where you go out every night and try and move somebody and have them feel something and make them happy? And when you leave, and this was her phrase, you leave behind no residual harm.
Mm.
Now, that again, this is, if you're going to travel and play music, that's what you got to keep your eye on. And it's very easy for it to get lost in the shuffle. You can lose a lot of money playing music. You can get killed on the road driving. There's substance abuse that can come with this gig, and it's hard on relationships, personal relationships. But finding your way through those things in order to do this work is something that, if you're compelled to do it, then you want to do it in the most healthful and least damaging way you can, both for yourself and for others.
Wow, it's so compelling. I picked up harmonica late in life and did that for a while, and then kind of tried to learn to sing for a while, and now I picked up guitar about 4 years ago, at age 62.
Yeah.
It's like the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, it is. It is. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you get into that, you want to touch base with me about open tunings, which is something you should know very early, not late in your guitar playing career.
Okay.
Drop me a note.
Okay, I'll do that for sure. So you have played around a lot of different places. Do you have I don't know, thoughts, stories, examples, or things you think about in terms of that power of music, whatever it is, whether it's power, whether it's something else, that you see in the audience, that you see with other musicians, the way that they change or react, or just what is that, and how do you describe it, and what do you think about all that?
A quick story from 1970, and then I'll answer your question. In the present. On Memorial Day weekend in 1970, I took my high school sweetheart, to see Crosby, Stills and Nash at the Baltimore Civic Center in Maryland, and we navigated the Baltimore-Washington Parkway in my family's Impala station wagon, which was like driving a barge. And didn't wreck it, and managed to get a parking place and get in. We had seats, 15 or 20 yards from the stage on the floor, really good seats. And Crosby, Stills and Nash were singing like angels. Three of them sat on stools with 6 microphones, passing Stills D45 back and forth, or playing various acoustic guitars for about an hour. And then they broke and went off to reset the stage for the electric set. They came back and launched the band into Wooden Ships on the Water, and all those, the stuff from the first record.
Yeah.
And then Stills walks down to the foot of the stage and says, "I'd like you to join me in welcoming to the stage an old friend. We made a lot of great music together in the Buffalo Springfield. Please welcome Neil Young." And Neil Young walks out on stage, plugs his own guitar into his own amplifier, and launches the band into Ohio. This was 22 days after those kids were killed.
Oh my God.
At Kent State. And I heard that song at 120 or 140 dB. My God, it was loud. 20 yards from the stage, live for the first time. And it was just like having your skeleton tattooed. And I I've been grateful to Neil for that kick in the ass. I've been moved to write from someone else's point of view and not just my point of view. And to tell in some of my original songs the stories of people who don't get to tell their own stories generally. And so I think that what music can do for us is take, well, Yip Harburg said, the guy who wrote all the songs for The Wizard of Oz and most of the dialogue, and Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, this incredible left-wing songwriter, right? Yip said that words cause you to think a thought, and music causes you to feel a feeling, and a song causes you to feel a thought.
Whoa.
And so I think the job that we're after, and what the only reason I leave home, is to try and put someone in someone else's shoes for a few minutes. You know, a song is a perfect vehicle to put you in someone else's circumstances for a minute or two. You know, at the end of, 3 minutes down the road, you get your own shoes back. But for those 3 or 4 minutes, you can inhabit someone else's life and feel what it might be like to be there. And that is a way of creating empathy and compassion potentially in the world, and making it a little kinder and breaking down the barriers between us. And it's the only reason I leave home. There's no, God, I can make a lot more money doing a million other things. It's not about the money. It's about that moment of empathy with a room full of people who never thought about it like that before, which is something that I hear a lot when I do shows. And I've had people come to blues shows and say, I didn't think I liked blues, but I like what you do. And part of that is the stories, part of it's the social conscience, part of it's balancing the American picture. What better use of white privilege could we have than to kind of honor the biracial nature of this country?
True.
And our culture and the music that we love. It's not just biracial now; it's multiracial, of course. But
right.
but we have this idea that the world's one way, and music can kick the doors down a little bit and open that up. And that's if I have a mission in life, it would be something like that. I mean, I love to play. I love the sound. I've always loved the sound. But the use to which we can put that adds another layer to the work. It's not just snap your fingers and wasn't that wonderful. There's something else that can be done with it.
Wow, yeah, it's well said, very profound. It's amazing that power. I mean, I've been in many audiences listening to music or driving in the car, and you start shedding a tear for something, but you're really saying it so well. Do you think a lot of musicians sort of feel the same way? I know there's the kind of that money aspect of that drives some folks, but
I would bet that everybody who picks up an instrument in their room by themselves, which is where one has to do this. I mean, somebody asked John Mayer where he learned to play guitar like that. He said, in my bedroom.
Perfect. I hear you.
So there's a lot of alone time, and the learning curve is steep. I mean, it's a long, you're a long way before you get success.
Okay.
Even just functionally, just marginal kind of, I can get through this tune. There's a lot of, I don't think anybody picks up an instrument thinking I'm going to make a bunch of money with this. I may be wrong, but I think we pick it up because we're compelled to pick it up, because it looks interesting, because and then you either stay or don't stay because of how your heart responds to that. So I'm willing to give everybody the benefit of the doubt on picking up a musical instrument for the right reasons. Now, they can get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And we've seen that happen.
So, also, I mean, you're very, thoughtful, socially active. It's not just playing songs and touching people. I mean, you really put a lot behind it. I know you talk about, important things, social issues when you play. How does that tie in? I mean, I guess the two of them for you are very, they're bound together in a sense. But how does music inform your political thoughts or your social thoughts, et cetera? How does that tie in? Because I know you really are very, you speak your mind on what you believe for society.
Well, we mostly, my stage reps are mostly about not my opinions, but our history. And I choose what part of our history to talk about, and that's my choice. And generally, I do that to frame a song which compels me. So for me, it's always been music first, but then there are these other things that are involved in it. And for it to make sense as a white man playing blues or talking about black music or immigration or the other original songs that I've written around those things, those kind of issues, it's incumbent on us to know what we're doing. And what the context is for the work that we're doing, and then to share whatever of that context makes the song hit an audience a little harder. Telling jokes about or talking about how hard it was to get to the gig, or how far I've traveled, or where I was yesterday, is of far less use to the community than knowing a little bit about the history of a song. And that, to me, is a good use of stage time. So I'm trying to use both the time between the songs and the songs themselves to create a kind of a triangulation on a human experience, where the facts that introduce a song and the history that lays out there is one thing that you may or may not have ever heard before. The song itself drives those facts into the emotional brain, and it becomes an experience that I hope is indelible. By combining these two elements of sort of the rational mind and the feeling mind, the left brain and the right brain, and tying them together with the amygdala, with the part of us that feels emotion and responds emotionally to things, and that makes for a compelling performance. And I think we can make the world a little better with something as ephemeral as music in the air.
Well,
I think we can do it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I know we can. It seems as though there are a lot of people who, maybe in reaction to some of the things that are going on politically, but a lot of people speaking out, a lot of people getting out there and, fighting for the people who have a hard time fighting for themselves.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about musicians, people playing music? I mean, you were talking about what you do and you talk about the history. Any thoughts, tips, or just what do you think would be good things for people to focus on, musicians out there playing? What can we do? What can a lot of us do to help make a better world using music? I mean, you've said a lot about it. You've talked about the power. I just wonder if you have some other suggestions or things that you think about or wish people might do a little more of or less of. I don't know.
In America, we are told, and we're a very, very young country, that essentially that an artist is about self-expression and about their ego-driven beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's been right. I mean, there's certainly examples of that in the world. We can find them, without looking too far. But traditionally, from the Neanderthal campfires until now, the shaman, the storyteller, the griot, the singer, the performer, has been holding up a mirror to the community and saying, look, this is who we are. This is part of who we are. Remember this. And then asking the question, are we happy with this? And so I look on the role of the artist in society the way a shaman or a griot would function in a traditional society, where we are in some ways keepers of a history. We are creating new work that hopefully is compelling and that awakens the emotions of our listeners in real time here, but also bringing our history to us and saying, are we happy with this? Have we reached the place where we want to stop progressing? Is there something yet to be done here? And looking on the role of the artist in society in that way, as a servant to the community, not a servant to our own egos or our own bank accounts, I think is something that I would like to see more musicians engage in consciously, not have it be an accident. I mean, I think a lot of people do this kind of work without formulating it quite the way I do. But it's not about me. I'm just saying this is how I think about it, and I think that not buying into the greater culture's stereotypes about who we are as artists and musicians, I think is a very, very good thing. And then getting to the bottom of who you are and what you want to do and why is also a really good thing. And if the answer is money, God, go be a banker. I mean, there's a lot more money in doing other things. There's a lot more money in doing other things. So, my hope is for us all to keep our eye on the ball, and the ball here has to do with moving the people in front of you, and moving with them, and having an experience, a shared communal experience of hearing something and adapting to it, moving in response to it. I would much rather have an audience walk away feeling differently than walk out going, "Damn, he's good." Impressing somebody is nowhere near as valuable as having them move in their own relationship to the world. And I don't think you can fire your arrows at two targets. So my hope is not to have people walk out and go, "Wow, he's great. I want to slam my hands in a car door. He can really play." But instead go, "I want to go home and play all night.
Yeah,
I'm with him."
Yeah, that sounds good. Just a couple things in this. I think they're related, but I'm not sure. In what you're talking about, there's this perspective of musicians and artists as being selfish and greedy. I think that people basically, we're not all trying to make as much money as possible. We're not all trying to have the most giant houses we can, but I think humans are really creators and contributors. We create all kinds of great stuff, and we contribute. Musicians really, do a lot of that, and you said it, very well. But in that, I mean, I struggle a little bit with this as I'm learning guitar, as I'm wanting to play songs for people. Sometimes that ego comes in and says, I imagine myself and having, some friends say, "Gosh, Jeff Gurley got good." How do you sort of separate that out? How do you get out of your head and play with that intention you're talking about? I just wonder if you have some thoughts on that. You've been playing music a long time. You can just kind of play sometimes.
Well, you're only as good as your last performance. I mean, but the ego is a perfectly great thing in the human, and how we deal with our lives. And I think that you ignore it at your peril. But it's part of the gasoline that drives every human endeavor. I will use a metaphor, right? But it's the gasoline. It's not the steering wheel. And you just really don't want to give it the wheel. Our ego is there to spur us on to greater heights in between our hearts and the inner side of our skull. But it has almost nothing to do with the social well-being of the community. And so keeping your ego in the practice room, keeping your ego in the, when you come off stage, you go like, "Don't ever do that again." Or, "That was good. Keep that part." We refine ourselves as we perform. We refine our performances, and we refine ourselves. We become better people when we're on stage in front of a group of people. And when you fail out there, you have to go like, "That never happened before. Let me try this again." That's the right attitude to have, to bring to the stage. And it's the only one that will let you stay there, because bad things will happen. Things will go wrong. Things that have never happened before will happen on stage. And so you have to just go like, ah! You can't burst into tears and run for the wings. You can't get mad. And if you engage your ego when you're in front of a bunch of people, you're going to start misbehaving in wild and unpredictable ways. You have to hold it to the side. Now, when you get off stage, you can walk into the hotel room at the end of the night, look in the mirror in the bathroom and say, if you ever do that again, you'll never work in this town again. You're fired. But that's the place with the ego, because it's like our critic, it's our editor. It helps us excel at something. We have pride in our work and our craftsmanship and what we've learned. But it's a really destructive thing to trot out on stage as if it has the right to belong there. I really, so you just push in the clutch and let it coast while you go on stage, and cross your fingers and try and stay present.
Yeah.
And we all want to put our best foot forward when you go on stage, but it's got to be your foot. It can't be someone else's foot. It has to be yours. And so learning by doing this work, which foot is actually yours is kind of a part of the self-knowledge that comes with making music and playing for people. We're playing for people. That's important.
Oh, well, so much, so many good thoughts, such great perspectives on things, very helpful. I think that anybody who's listening will definitely get something out of hearing what Scott Ainslie has to say. So I want to really thank you very much for the time. I've enjoyed it, and may check you out on some of those tunings and things, try to learn a little bit about that. I'd really like to do that. And when Scott comes around to your town, if you're out there listening, you should go see him, because he's really great performer, great human being. Thanks very much, Scott.
Yeah, you're welcome. You'll find some stuff on Open Tunings and for guitarists at the cattailmusic.com site, which is our site. A lot of history on the music, and you'll be able to get in touch with me then too. Sounds like our time is up.
That's the bird clock. Yeah, I guess the bird is saying, okay, that's about it. That's enough time, you guys. The clock was a little bit upset today because of daylight savings time, but
Oh yeah, mine was too.
Yeah, we got through it. Okay, Scott Ainslie, thanks very much. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.